This is my backyard in Porter's Lake. In 2010, Porter's Lake had a second forest fire, again that was caused by carelessness. This fire came less than 10 feet from our home. The fire marshal told us our house should have burnt, but yet it did not. Now you have to remember, on June 13th, 2010, when Porter's Lake had its second forest fire 2 years in a row, there was tens of thousands of people in the Porter's Lake Echo community that was evacuated because the community was too dangerous to return back home to. There was no saying that residents were going to have a home to come back to when they came home from work. This fire took place on a Friday. People were coming home from a hard day's work only to be turned down by a fire marshal to tell them that you have to evacuate and report to an emergency shelter. Cole Harbour Place in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia was an evacuation place for tens of thousands of people in the Porter's Lake Echo community. Tens of thousands of those community residents who live in Porter's Lake Echo, there was no saying that they were going to have a home to return back to when they did return. Unfortunately, in 2009, 4 homes were lost. Fortunately, on June 13th, 2010, on Porter's Lake's second forest fire, no homes were lost. But, on the other hand, when a forest fire takes place, there's no saying what you're going to come across. And one of the downfalls on the 2 forest fires, both in June of 2009 and June again the following year of 2010, one of the biggest challenges what the firefighters had to fight was, it wasn't the fire was the challenge, it was the high winds. The winds blew for nearly a week straight for the forest fires that wouldn't burn out. Firefighters were fighting for nearly a week to put out that fire on June 13th, 2009, which traveled over 40 kilometers and scraped through the edges of Porter's Lake and ended up in East Lawrencetown, where the forest fire ended, just on the outskirts of Snows Lake in East Lawrencetown, Nova Scotia. Standing here beside me is where the forest fire actually took place on June 13th, 2010. This is no recreation for this film, this is the real McCoy. So when you look, there's about, I'd say about 500 feet of debris. Over time, the trees will grow back. You know, you clean up the shrub and the dead trees out of the way, and the sun will come in and the trees will start to regrow. It won't happen overnight, but within 5 to 10 years, you'll see the process taking place. So hopefully when people set fires, they'll understand the dangers of what comes with fires. If you're really not sure how to set fires, trust me when I tell you this. Don't. You're doing yourself a favor, you're doing your neighbors a favor, and you're doing your community a favor if you don't at all. Since when I was 6 years old, I've been setting fires since I was 6 my whole life. I know how to set fires. In the high winds, do not set fires. With the global warming taking effect, Canada doesn't get the winters what they used to get. One time your winters would stretch from the middle of November right to April. Now you're lucky if you get from December to January with winter. And then from like this year in 2012, in February, here we are with summer weather. Obviously, you know, 20 years ago, you could set a brush fire, not, you know, because we didn't have this temperature. Now, here we are in March of 2012 with heat temperatures reaching up to 32 degrees in the middle of March. That's a sign that global warming is taking its effect. Us as a whole has to adjust around it, how the figure ways to get around and how to cope with it. And setting fires in that high winds in the middle of the summer is not a way to deal with it. The best way to deal with, you know, if you got shrubs you like to get rid of, is call your local HRM government. They're the ones that will take it off your hands. Anyway, this is how I got the woods cleaned up, and I cleaned up after the forest fire. It was just an old rake and a pair of cutters I had, and I just dug at it, just kept chipping away at it, and a couple days later it started looking like this. Like I said before, it really doesn't take that long at all. It looks harder than it actually is, but once you keep at it, really it's not that hard. This is the impact what a single match can do if you're not careful how to handle a campfire during high winds. All this here could have been avoided if the person in Lake Echo known how to handle a campfire during high winds. Having a campfire during high winds is not the time to be having any kind of a fire. Brush fire, campfire, small fire, a fire in a barrel. During high winds, that is not the time when they have a fire. Sparks from a barrel can actually shoot out and shoot into a woods during high winds. This is the impact that took place on June 13th, 2009, and the sad part is all this here could have been avoided. One of the things that I remember about the June 13th, 2010 forest fire is how the RCMP, firefighters, the ground search and rescue all came together to help one another. They worked hard, tireless, day in and day out to make sure that people's homes were safe and secure. The other thing I always remember about the 2010 forest fire on June 13th was political people. Keith Caldwell, the Eastern Shore former MLA, was actually driving up and down the road checking to see if people was all right and safe. That forest fire was another fire that could have been avoided, that was set in high winds with no fire burning permit, and what was left unattendedly, and which was caused by carelessness. These are one of the laws that got to change. This is Snow's Lake, just on the outskirts of Porter's Lake. This is where the June 13th, 2009 forest fire ended, just 40 kilometers from where it started, from Lake Echo. This lake actually saved homes from being destroyed from the fire.